Before begin this emotional, heartwarming story, please tell us where are you watching from? We'd love to hear that from you. The morning sun slipped quietly through the curtains, painting soft gold on the pale walls of the small house Jennifer Susan had called home for the past 10 years. She had risen early, like she always did on her birthday, a childlike spark of hope fluttering in her chest. She still believed in magic, in love, in the kind of surprise that could melt away months of coldness. Jennifer stood in front of the mirror, gently brushing her golden hair, remembering how Rick used to call her Sunshine. That name hadn't left his lips in over a year. Still, she tried. She wore the soft blue dress he once said brought out her eyes. She laid out breakfast, pancakes just the way he liked them, crispy on the edges, soft in the middle. But the seat across from her stayed empty. Minutes passed, then hours. By evening, the silence had become heavier than ever. She lit the candles on the small birthday cake she bought for herself. Chocolate, his favorite, not hers. The tiny flames danced with fragile hope, waiting to be blown out with a wish. She looked at her phone. No texts, no calls, not even from her parents, whom she hadn't spoken to in years, because Rick didn't like them. The front door creaked open. Rick walked in, wearing his usual dark coat and an unreadable face. No smile, no card, no flowers, not even a hello. Jennifer's heart quickened. She stood up, smoothing her dress nervously. "Rick," she began, her voice small, "I was starting to think you forgot." He didn't answer. Instead, he tossed a brown envelope onto the table like it was a pizza menu. "Happy birthday," he said flatly. She frowned, confused. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the envelope. As she opened it, her heart sank into her stomach. Divorce papers. Her eyes widened, then blinked in disbelief. The room spun. "What is this?" Rick leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I'm done, Jen. I found someone else. She makes me feel alive again." Jennifer's knees went weak. "But today, on my birthday, you couldn't wait a day." He shrugged like her pain didn't matter. "No point pretending anymore." "But I gave up everything for you," she whispered. Her voice cracked, raw and desperate. "My family, my dreams, my career. I chose you. Every time." Rick didn't even flinch. "That was your choice." The candles flickered quietly behind her, still waiting to be blown out. The soft birthday lights now mocked her. The room smelled of chocolate and betrayal. Without another word, Rick grabbed his keys, walked to the door, and didn't look back. Jennifer stood frozen, her breath short and shallow. Her body felt heavy, like her heart was made of bricks. The door slammed behind him, and with that sound, her entire world shattered. The house was silent again. Only the ticking clock and the faint humming of the refrigerator kept her company. She slowly sank into the chair, her legs unable to hold her weight anymore. She stared at the papers on the table. Her name was written there, Jennifer Susan, beside legal words she couldn't even read through the blur of her tears. She picked up a fork with a shaking hand, trying to cut the cake. The knife slid awkwardly, breaking the frosting. She forced a bite into her mouth, but it tasted like ashes. She chewed it slowly, swallowing the lump in her throat. Alone, on her birthday. The tears came harder now, falling like a storm she couldn't stop. She cried until her chest ached, until the skin under her eyes burned, until her lips quivered and her voice could no longer form words. Every room in that house echoed with the memories of a love she once believed in. The living room where they danced on New Year's Eve. The kitchen where they used to bake cookies and laugh about the mess. The bedroom where they once whispered dreams about their future. She stared at her phone again. No missed calls, no text from her sister, no "I'm sorry" from Rick. She had burned every bridge for him, blindly thinking he'd always stay. She had no one. She looked in the mirror above the fireplace and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Puffy eyes, smeared mascara, trembling lips. A woman discarded, a woman abandoned, a woman who gave everything and was left with nothing. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passed, kids laughed, streetlights flickered. But inside Jennifer's home, time had stopped. That night, she sat on the couch wrapped in a thin blanket. her eyes dry now but her soul screaming. She didn't know how she'd wake up tomorrow. She didn't know if she even wanted to. She held her wedding ring in her palm, the same ring Rick had slipped on her finger 10 years ago, promising forever. Now it was just metal, cold, meaningless. At 11:59 p.m., the candles were still burning. Jennifer stood up, walked over to the cake, and in a whisper said, "I wish I could feel loved again." And then with a shaky breath, she blew the candles out. But life, as cruel as it had been, was not done with her yet. Because just down the street, under the quiet moonlight, a man named Michael Mateo, kind-hearted, powerful, and lonely in his own way, was about to walk into her life. And everything was about to change. The walls of the house were closing in. The silence had teeth, and it bit Jennifer Susan every second she sat alone. The echo of Rick's final words, "I've found someone new," still rang in her ears like a cruel song on repeat. She stood up, her legs numb beneath her. Her fingers fumbled with the light coat hanging by the door. No purse, no phone, just her broken heart, and the darkness outside. The cool night air kissed her skin as she stepped out into the world, unsure where she was going. The streets were quiet, wrapped in shadows and memories. Her heels clicked softly against the sidewalk, and her eyes searched for peace where there was none. She passed glowing windows of warm homes, families inside laughing, eating, celebrating life. Her throat tightened. Tonight should have been hers too. Her birthday, her joy. Instead, it had been stolen, replaced by silence, abandonment, and papers that screamed, "You were never enough." Soon she found herself at the edge of the city park, a place she hadn't walked through in years. The tall trees loomed above like old guardians. A breeze rustled the leaves, whispering secrets into the night. She made her way to a lonely bench beneath a street lamp. The light flickered softly above her, casting long shadows across the pathway. Her hands clutched her coat tighter around her, but it couldn't keep out the chill in her soul. Her hair still held the soft curls she had styled that morning, back when she believed the day would be different. Her makeup had melted into streaks down her cheeks, her face a quiet battlefield of pain. And then the tears came, silent at first, then uncontrollable. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Her shoulders shook with every breath. The sound of her heartbreak filled the space around her, but no one stopped. No one saw, except for one man. Michael Mateo had no reason to be walking the park at that hour. But grief had no schedule, and loneliness didn't ask permission. He had just finished another high-stakes meeting and stepped away from his penthouse for air. His golden retriever, Bella, padded quietly beside him. Michael was tall, dressed in a simple gray sweater and jeans, a rare break from his usual tailored suits. Most people only saw the headlines: real estate tycoon, millionaire genius, Latino powerhouse of the city. But tonight he was just a man with heavy thoughts and a dog who always knew when he needed a walk. And that's when he saw her, a woman slumped, sobbing, shaking, in a light coat too thin for the night. The kind of cry that didn't come from a bad day, but from something deeper, something broken. His heart clenched, not because he knew her, but because he didn't have to. Pain like that didn't need an introduction. He approached slowly. Bella paused beside him, ears perked. "Are you okay?" Michael asked gently, his voice low, careful not to startle her. Jennifer looked up, startled. Her eyes were red, cheeks streaked with tears, lips trembling. "No," she whispered, "but I guess that doesn't matter to anyone." "It matters to me," he said softly. "It really does." She blinked, confused. A stranger cared. Michael crouched beside the bench, his eyes meeting hers. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't pry. He just stayed there, present, human. "I was walking my dog," he added, trying to ease the tension. "Bella usually picks where we go. I think she brought me here for a reason." Jennifer let out a shaky breath, a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but not a sob either. She glanced at the golden retriever, who wagged her tail gently. "She has good timing," Jennifer murmured. "I think so too," Michael said. "May I sit?" Jennifer hesitated, then nodded. He sat at the other end of the bench, giving her space but not letting her feel alone. Minutes passed in silence. But it wasn't the cruel kind she had felt earlier. This was soft, calm, safe. Finally, she spoke again. "My husband left me," she said, voice trembling. "Tonight, on my birthday." Michael turned to her, his chest tightening. "I'm so sorry." She nodded slowly. 10 years. And he just handed me divorce papers. Like it was nothing. Michael didn't speak. He let her keep going. "I gave up everything for him, my family, my art, even my own voice, just to make him happy. And still, it wasn't enough." Her voice cracked. I thought maybe he had a surprise planned. Maybe a small cake, a card, anything." She looked down at her hands. "Instead, he gave me an ending." Michael's gaze softened. "Some ending," he said, "are just the beginning, hiding in disguise." She turned to him, confused. He smiled gently. "Sometimes the worst nights of our lives lead us to the best people we've never met." Jennifer stared at him. No one had said anything like that to her before. Not even her friends, before Rick made her cut them off. Michael stood slowly and held out a hand. "Come on," he said softly. "Let me get you some coffee. You look like you need something warm and someone who listens." Jennifer stared at his hand, a stranger, a man with kind eyes, and for the first time in years her heart whispered, "Try." She placed her hand in his. It was warm, solid, real. And in that moment, under the cold moonlight and flickering street lamps, Jennifer didn't feel so invisible anymore. She didn't know who Michael Mateo was. Not yet, but she would. And that night, her worst night, would be the night her life quietly, gently began again. The little bell above the cafe door chimed softly as Jennifer stepped inside behind Michael. The warm scent of roasted coffee beans and vanilla filled the air, wrapping around her like a much-needed hug. The cafe was nearly empty, only a college student typing on a laptop in the corner and a sleepy barista behind the counter. Jennifer hesitated at the entrance, still unsure if she was dreaming or simply too numb to feel the moment. Her coat hung loosely over her shoulders. Her cheeks were stained from tears, but she followed him anyway. Michael turned to her with a gentle smile. "Pick anywhere, my treat." She nodded silently and chose a booth near the back, where the dim lights hung low and the world outside the foggy window seemed far away. He ordered for both of them, a hot caramel latte for her and a black coffee for himself. When the drinks arrived, she took the mug into her hands as if it were something fragile and precious. The heat seeped into her fingers, chasing away the cold still trapped in her bones. For a while, neither of them spoke. The hum of the refrigerator and soft jazz music filled the quiet between them. Finally, Jennifer broke the silence. "I never thought my life would end up like this." Michael looked at her, not with pity, but with presence. "I met Rick when I was 22, she began. Her voice was quiet, cautious, but steady. "I was working in a tiny art gallery. He walked in one day with a friend, and I thought he was charming, confident, like he knew what he wanted." Michael leaned in slightly, his hands wrapped around his mug, eyes locked on her, not a flicker of distraction. "I was young and full of dreams," she continued, her gaze drifting toward the window. "I painted every day. I wanted to travel, to open my own studio. But Rick, he wanted something different. He wanted a wife who would support his vision." Her lips trembled, but she didn't stop. "At first I thought I could be both, a wife and an artist. But little by little, I gave things up. I stopped painting. I lost contact with my family. My friends faded away. He always had reasons, always said it was better this way." Michael's jaw clenched slightly, but he stayed quiet, letting her empty the pain she'd kept buried for years. "I kept telling myself he loved me," she whispered, "that maybe if I changed more, smiled more, needed less, he'd come back to me. But he never did." Her voice cracked. "And tonight, he gave me divorce papers. On my birthday. Like I was just some obligation he couldn't wait to get rid of." The tears began to rise again, but she wiped them away quickly. "I'm sorry," she said, embarrassed. "You didn't sign up for this." Michael shook his head slowly. Don't apologize for feeling. You deserve to be heard. Jennifer stared at him. His voice wasn't overly sweet. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply real. And that made it feel like the safest thing she'd heard in years. He leaned forward slightly. I'm sorry that someone made you feel like you weren't enough. Because from where I'm sitting, you seem like someone who gave her entire heart. That struck something deep inside her. Her lips parted, but no words came. She just blinked at him, letting those quiet words settle into the wounds Rick had left. You didn't deserve that, Michael added gently. And I'm not just saying it to be kind. I mean it. Jennifer looked into his eyes, and something inside her shifted. He wasn't trying to fix her. He wasn't trying to own her pain or turn it into some lesson. He was just seeing her. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. You don't even know me, she said softly. Michael smiled. That's true, but sometimes you don't need to know someone's whole story to recognize their soul. Her breath caught. She looked away, overwhelmed. He let the silence sit between them again, patient, gentle. Then he spoke. Can I tell you something? He asked. Jennifer nodded. My mother was a single mom. My father left before I turned 3. She worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. I grew up watching her cry into coffee mugs just like that one. I watched her smile through pain because the world didn't care. He paused. I promised myself that if I ever got the chance to help someone like her, someone who gave more than they got, I'd do it. Jennifer swallowed hard. His story wasn't pity, it was connection. Michael leaned back, sighing softly. Truth is, I've built this big life. Real estate, contracts, meetings, money. But lately it all feels empty. She tilted her head. Why? He looked at her, his voice low. Because success means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with. Those words landed heavy in the air. Jennifer didn't know how to respond. Her heart was still fragile, barely stitched together, but a strange warmth had begun to bloom, like the first sign of spring after a brutal winter. I'm not looking for anything, she said quietly, honestly. Michael nodded. Neither am I. Just, maybe a new beginning, for both of us. She gave a faint smile. It was small, but real. Outside the window, the night had grown quieter, softer. Snow began to drift down in small flurries, dancing under the streetlight like tiny pieces of grace. Jennifer took a deep breath. She didn't know who Michael Mateo really was, not yet, but something told her. He wasn't just another man. He was the start of something different. And maybe, just maybe, the universe had sent him to her on purpose. The morning after their unexpected coffee shop confession, Jennifer barely slept. Her thoughts were tangled in all the things she'd said and the things Michael didn't say. She had poured her heart out to a stranger, and instead of turning away, he stayed. That alone was something she wasn't used to. She pulled the blanket tighter around her. The house still felt hollow. Every picture on the wall reminded her of Rick, of promises broken, of birthdays forgotten. Her heart was still sore, but something felt different. Then a knock. Soft, polite. Not the kind that made her jump or brace for anger. Just gentle. She hesitated, her fingers trembling as she reached for the doorknob. When she opened the door, there he was. Michael Mateo, holding a brown paper breakfast bag and 2 coffees in his hands. Good morning, he said, his voice warm but slightly shy. I figured you probably didn't eat last night. Jennifer blinked. His thoughtfulness made her chest ache in a different way. No one had brought her breakfast in years, not even Rick on her birthdays. I didn't, she admitted. He smiled. Then I'm glad I showed up. She stepped aside, letting him in. They sat on her small kitchen table, which hadn't been used in weeks. She unwrapped the bag slowly. Inside was a warm croissant, a breakfast sandwich, and her favorite, a small cup of strawberry yogurt. How did you know? She asked, surprised. Michael chuckled. Lucky guess, or maybe you just look like someone who enjoys strawberries. She laughed, a real laugh, light and unforced. It felt foreign, but good. From that morning on, Michael became her morning light. Over the next few weeks, he visited often, sometimes with food, sometimes with flowers, but always with that steady presence that made her breathe easier. They took long walks through the park, sometimes with Bella trotting happily beside them. They talked for hours about childhood memories, favorite books, embarrassing stories, and dreams they were afraid to say aloud. Jennifer started painting again. Michael found her one day in the living room, her hands covered in colors, her eyes sparkling. "I miss this," she confessed. "I miss this version of you," he replied softly. And for the first time in forever, she smiled not because she was told to, but because her heart finally had something to smile about. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. Jennifer was curled up on her couch with a warm blanket, flipping through channels, when the screen froze on a news report. The voice of the anchor was bright and excited. And in today's Business Weekly, Michael Mateo, the real estate genius with a heart of gold, is making headlines again. Known not just for his billion-dollar developments, but also for his secret donations to struggling schools and women's shelters. Michael Mateo continues to redefine what power looks like. The screen flashed images of him at fancy galas, cutting ribbons, speaking into microphones. In one shot, he stood in front of a massive skyscraper. Clean suit, confident smile, all business. Jennifer sat frozen, her mouth dropped open. "That's him?" Her heartbeat picked up. She stared at the screen. There was no mistake. The man who brought her croissants and walked with her in the rain, the one who listened to her broken stories, was one of the richest men in the entire city. And he never said a word. She didn't know whether to feel shocked, betrayed, or simply stunned. Later that evening, when he showed up at her door like he always did, this time with hot cocoa and fresh bagels, she opened the door, her eyes wide. "You're him," she said, voice trembling. "You're that Michael Mateo." He paused, blinking. "So, you saw the news?" Jennifer stepped back. "Why didn't you tell me?" Michael took a slow breath, setting the bag down on the table. "Because the world sees the money first," he said quietly. "The headlines, the buildings, the bank account. But I didn't want that from you." Her throat tightened. "I wanted you to see me. Not the man in the suit. Just the man who met you in the park, who likes his coffee black and walks his dog at 2 a.m. when the city is sleeping." Jennifer looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment her mind raced with the weight of what he'd hidden, but then she remembered the man who sat with her when she was broken, who listened without judging, who brought her breakfast and never asked for anything in return. Her voice softened. "I did see you," she whispered. "Before I saw the news? Before the money?" His eyes searched hers. "And what do you see now?" Jennifer stepped forward. Her heart raced, not because of the wealth, not because of his reputation, but because he had never treated her like she was less. She saw the man who stayed. "I see someone kind," she said softly. "And I don't care about your bank account. I care that you brought me coffee when no one else remembered I existed." Michael's shoulders relaxed, his eyes softening. "I was afraid you'd change once you knew." "I'm only changing," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "because you reminded me I deserve more." And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding deeper than truth, deeper than wealth. She had lost everything on her birthday, but now in the most unexpected way, she had gained something far more valuable. Someone who saw her worth. Someone who made her feel seen, not as a shadow of who she was, but as the woman she was becoming. 3 months passed, and everything in Jennifer's life slowly changed. Her mornings began with laughter instead of silence. Her afternoons were filled with purpose. She started painting again, teaching art at a local youth center Michael helped fund without even telling her. And her evenings, they were filled with long talks, walks, and slow dancing in her small kitchen with Michael as soft music played and candles flickered. She still had wounds, deep ones, but she was healing. Then one day, Michael surprised her. "I want you to come with me," he said, holding a long velvet box in his hand. "What is it?" she asked, a nervous smile playing on her lips. He opened it slowly. Inside was a stunning, deep navy gown. Elegant, modest, timeless. "There's a charity gala tonight," he said. "You don't have to go, but I'd be honored if you did." Jennifer hesitated. The last time she dressed up for someone, it ended in heartbreak. Her mind filled with images of Rick, his cold eyes, his cruel words, the way he used to criticize every dress she wore. "I don't know," she whispered. "What if I don't fit in?" Michael stepped closer. His hands gently took hers. "You don't have to fit in," he said softly. "You just have to be you. That's more than enough." Her eyes shimmered. His words were like medicine, soft, warm, healing. So she said yes. That evening, Jennifer stood in front of her mirror, her hair curled gently down her shoulders. The gown hugged her like it had been made just for her. A touch of makeup highlighted the glow that had slowly returned to her face. But inside, her heart thudded like it was still broken. When Michael arrived to pick her up, he stood stunned for a moment. "You look," he began, then paused. "You look like the most beautiful moment I've ever seen." Her cheeks flushed, and for a second, all her doubts melted. Until they arrived. The gala was everything she feared, and more. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling. Tables covered in gold-trimmed linens sparkled under soft lighting. Men in designer tuxedos and women in diamonds floated around like royalty. Jennifer tried to breathe. She held onto Michael's arm tightly, but her knees felt weak. People turned as they entered. Some smiled politely. Others whispered. "She's not one of us," a woman said, too loudly to be subtle. "She's not even his type," someone else added, glancing at her with narrowed eyes. Jennifer felt the heat rise to her face. Her skin burned with shame. She knew what they meant. She was white. Michael was Latino. Their stares weren't just about class. They were about color. They were about hate. Quiet, expensive hate hidden behind champagne glasses and fake smiles. But Michael, he never let go of her hand. Not once. He looked into her eyes every time someone sneered. He whispered small jokes to make her laugh. He stood beside her like a silent shield, strong and calm. But Jennifer still felt the cracks forming inside her. Later, after the gala, they walked outside. The stars were scattered across the night sky, twinkling like whispers of hope. They stood on a terrace overlooking the city lights, far away from the crowd and its poison. Jennifer looked down at her shoes. "I don't think I belong in your world," she said softly. Michael turned to her, his face unreadable for a moment. Then, without a word, he reached into his pocket. He knelt, right there, under the stars, on the cold stone floor of the terrace. Jennifer froze. Her heart pounded so loud she thought the sky would hear. He took her hand gently and looked up at her. "Jennifer Susan," he whispered, his voice shaking slightly. "Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to her eyes, her lips parted, but no words came. He continued, "Not because I need a pretty date to Gallus, not because I want to fix your past, but because I see you." His voice cracked with emotion. "I see the woman who survived, the one who gives her heart even when it's broken, the one who paints joy, even after knowing pain." He swallowed hard. "I love you, not for who you were, but for who you are right now. And because your heart is worth more than anything in this world. Money, status, name, none of it matters without you." Jennifer fell to her knees with him, her tears spilling freely now. "But people won't accept us," she whispered. He smiled, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "Then let's give them something to talk about." She laughed through her tears. And there, under the quiet sky, surrounded by the stars and a love stronger than every whisper of hate, she said yes. Jennifer said yes. And for the first time in her life, those words didn't come from fear, pressure, or desperation. They came from love. Real love. The wedding wasn't held in a mansion or a cathedral. It was in a quiet garden just outside the city. Flowers danced gently in the spring breeze. The sunlight filtered through trees, casting soft golden light over the ceremony. No press, no high society gossipers, no flashing cameras. Just love. Real friends stood around them. People who had walked through pain and chose kindness instead of judgment. Some were women Jennifer had met at the art center. Others were Michael's quiet allies, people of different races, stories, and scars. Jennifer wore a simple ivory gown. No diamonds, no veil. just her smile and the freedom in her heart. Michael stood under a wooden arch covered in white roses. His suit was clean, but his eyes held more richness than any fortune. When she walked down the aisle, their eyes locked, and the world disappeared. I used to think no one would love me after what I went through, Jennifer whispered as they exchanged vows. Michael squeezed her hand. But now I know. I just needed someone brave enough to love me because of what I went through. He smiled, his voice strong and full of emotion. You were never broken, he whispered back. You were becoming. They kissed under the sun as their guests clapped and cried. Jennifer was no longer just someone's ex-wife. She was someone's everything, and she didn't need permission to feel worthy. Their new life began with purpose. Together, they opened a women's healing center in the heart of the city. It had colorful walls, warm food, childcare, therapy rooms, and job training spaces. There were beds for women escaping violence, art classes, a small garden for planting hope. Jennifer gave it her soul. She sat with survivors of all colors and backgrounds. She painted with women who hadn't smiled in months. She told her story, not for pity, but to remind them healing was possible. Michael didn't just fund the center, he stood beside it. He donated millions to other nonprofits focused on racial justice and women's empowerment. He hired women who had been told they were too broken to work. He partnered with Black-led organizations, Latino-owned businesses, and shelters helping LGBTQ plus youth escape hate. He used his name not to build wealth, but to build worth. And the world noticed. One rainy evening, Jennifer and Michael were featured in a local news segment. The headline read, "Millionaire and his wife turned tears into change, a love story that's changing lives." They weren't seeking fame, but people were listening. And one of those people was Rick. He sat alone in a dark condo, the same one Jennifer used to clean while he scrolled through his phone and ignored her birthday. Now the phone rang, and he picked it up. The reporter's voice talked about the woman he once broke, how she was now helping hundreds. Rick's face twisted with regret. He reached for his phone and searched her name. When he saw the headline, her photo appeared, smiling, alive, glowing beside a man who held her like she mattered. He called. Once, twice. No answer. He left a voicemail. "Jennifer, I saw the news. You look different. I miss you." But she never called back, because she didn't need to. She didn't need his apology. She didn't need revenge. She didn't even need closure. She had already closed that chapter with every smile she now gave to the world. One day, as she stood on the center's porch, watching a group of young women laugh and plant flowers, Michael came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You changed lives," he whispered. She leaned into him. "We did." He kissed her shoulder. "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of us," she said. This is what love looks like. Not perfect, not flashy, just real." He nodded. "And this is what healing looks like." Jennifer's story wasn't just about divorce or a surprise proposal. It was about finding worth in a world that tried to erase her. It was about overcoming racism, classism, and cruelty with compassion, love, and purpose. It was about remembering that healing isn't quiet, and kindness is powerful. And sometimes, the man who sees your tears, who listens, who stays, that man will not just love you. He'll rebuild the world with you. Together.